Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series, where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Selden, and today's guest is Kelly Meerbott. Kelly Meerbott is an acclaimed TEDx and keynote speaker, author, podcast host, and award-winning certified leadership expert. With a unique trauma-informed approach and PTSD training, Kelly has transformed the leadership landscape for hundreds of C-suite and senior executives and more than 400 high-ranking military officers. Her proven strategies help 90% of her clients overcome burnout, become more resilient, and achieve their goals. She holds multiple coaching certifications in human and organizational transformation, unconscious bias, leadership, cognitive therapy, and communications. Kelly's insights on burnout are featured in her best-selling book, From Burnout to Bliss, and her latest release, Meerbott's Fables. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
We're so happy to have you here. The thought process for this episode is that we'll cover burnout. As we
Yep.
heard, it's one of your expertise. You've got two books that cover it. And honestly, it's probably something that so many people today are dealing with. So I think this would be a huge topic to really cover.
Yeah, it's a chronic issue. I think it was in 2020, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the World Health Organization labeled it as a condition. And 75% of all doctors' visits are stress related. So I really pull that thread directly to burnout, especially if you're a high performer.
Definitely. So you brought that up, and I think it's a great way to start this off. You've got your books that discuss burnout. We've got the World Health Organization that references burnout and stress. Let's ground everybody. If you could really go into what burnout is and why we actually see people develop burnout.
So burnout isn't stress. It isn't working harder. It isn't forgetting to meditate. It's the slow death of your purpose emotionally inside environments that demand your body and abandon your soul. It's the slow numbing erosion of what made you brilliant in the first place. You still perform, but you stop belonging to yourself and to your work. And the most dangerous part is it rewards you for dying slowly. More promotions, more applause, less life. That's it in a nutshell.
Wow. So with that, how do you see people have burnout? What are the warning signs? Obviously, like you said, it's a slow death. So it's not something that you wake up one day and you're like, hey, I'm burnt out. What are the signs there so leadership can be proactive about burnout and notice it early on?
You know you're burning out when your excellence becomes armor instead of self expression. Chronic fatigue, chronic resentment, compassion fatigue, quitting mentally while your body stays put. It's not ambition slipping. Like those are the symptoms of your spirit waving the white flag. When success becomes a punishment, not a privilege, you're in the red zone. That's it. So if you can recognize those symptoms, that's where I would say if compassion fatigue is the first thing to present itself, pay attention. And one of the things, Josh, that I have my clients do is okay, how do you feel at a one? Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, energetically. If a one is like that irritation that you just can flick off your shoulder, okay, let's pay attention. But if you move up and it starts to be resentment and irritability, now you're at a five, your body feels like a clenched fist all the time. Those are the warning signals. It's your body, it's your energy. Like I told you before we even started recording, those are guidance systems
Right.
sending up the red flag going, hey, pay attention. What leaders can do is really know your teams. Think about sports teams and the greatest coaches. They know when a fast twitch muscle is off. That's how intimately they know their players. Or if you want to go to like ballet, they know when a ballerina can hold point for 5 minutes versus, okay, she's falling down because her toe hurts or something like that. That's a really simplified way of saying it, but it's just knowing those physical cues to point you in the direction of burnout.
So we have these physical cues. We've got a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 scale. Is there a point of no return on that scale? And where can leaders intercept the person and what can they do to really help?
Yes, there is a point of no return, and most leaders are closer than they think. The gray place is what I call it. If you think about the movie, and I'm dating myself here, Pleasantville.
Yeah.
So Pleasantville starts out black and white, and they start doing splotches of color. Think of it the opposite direction. That's the gray place where things start to go gray. And the gray place isn't loud, it's chillingly quiet. It's when indifference replaces ambition. When you don't care if you're making an impact anymore, it's when surviving is easier than trying. If you're close to burnout, you don't need time off. You need a total reformation of your relationship to work, yourself, and success.
You've said some interesting things there that really get me thinking about the leadership and professional realm that exists today. And one is knowing your people. And you hear so many people say, I'm a number on a piece of paper. I'm not a person. Nobody sees me as a person. And there are all these references of if you were to die today, they're going to have your role posted tomorrow and they're going to backfill you and all of these things. So it's really what do you owe the company or wherever you're working with that relationship? And I think one thing you mentioned to combat this is really knowing your people and knowing what those warning signs are. Because everything that you said, it sounds like there are personal warning signs to really understand if I myself am getting close to burnout. But you said the gray space is quiet. And if you've got somebody who's not quiet and somebody who challenges things and brings up ideas, and they're not loud in the room, but they're always going to give you their opinion, they're always trying to help things, and they become quiet, then that's our sign as a leader to know something's happening.
Yeah, something's off. And typically, we are not, and I'm borrowing this from Brene Brown, we are not thinking beings that sometimes feel, we're feeling beings that sometimes think. So, talking about emotional intelligence and emotional well being as fluffy stuff, it's not. They
Right.
are guidance systems. And if you know your people enough, that you see somebody and you've seen the colors come out of somebody who turns down, then that's your sign. That's your sign. And sometimes they don't know what it is. They think it's just chronic stress. And burnout is not stress. Like I said, it's that slow, numbing erosion of you as the essence of a great human being that typically contributes creatively. I remember my burnout. One of my favorite things to do is decorate for the holidays. And when I was like, God, that's just another thing on my to do list, I'm like, okay, time to check yourself.
Right.
It's those things. It's losing the joy out of the little things that you love to do. And by the way, a creative endeavor is something that you can use to build immunity against burnout.
That's an interesting way to think about it because I also think people attribute burnout to their jobs. And I'm going to have all of that color and joy bleed out of me when I'm at work, and then magically it'll come back when I'm at home. But to your point right there, that doesn't happen. Not only does burnout suck the joy out of your day-to-day work life, but it also then sucks the joy out of your hobbies and the things you do outside of work that help you escape the constant work that you do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I do want to say you don't counteract burnout. You counter program the systems that caused it, that created that burnout in the first place. Leaders who are the best at surviving burnout don't push through harder, they revolt against that system. So they stop measuring worth by output. They reclaim authority over their energy, not just their schedule. They refuse to live on a dopamine drip of empty wins. Really, in this, self care isn't the revolution, self respect is. And that is a huge distinction. I do believe that self care has a place in this, but it really goes back to self respect.
Right. You say something that makes me think of another interview that I had. The topic was imposter syndrome. And it makes me think that, to your point, you may not be able to counteract burnout itself, but you can challenge the system. And part of that was ensuring that the system and your work supports your values and your beliefs as opposed to everybody else's. I'm going to go do this work because it's going to make my manager happy and it's going to make the company happy. But it could be something that the reward and value system supports them, but never supports me.
Correct. And that's where the self respect comes in. Boundaries are really about saying, this is okay, this is not. My best friend, Carrie, I absolutely adore her. I was having an issue a couple years ago, and she said to me, so you have these imaginary boundaries that you have not communicated to anyone, and you're getting angry when somebody's crossing that boundary. And I was like, yeah, that's, yep. But it was great for me because I was able to course correct.
Mm.
And like I said, set my boundaries and honor those as part of who the structure of Kelly Meerbott is.
And I think with burnout, to that example, a lot of people think that when we get burned out, we're victims of the system. Is
Right.
there ownership that can then be put on the individual? And the way I think about this is your example. I'm a big believer in trust. And if you're building leadership and culture and everything, if there's no trust, then you don't have a foundation. It's crap. And with that trust, you can then have these open conversations about your boundaries, about when you are feeling burnt out and you're feeling, whether it's burnout or stress or something else that's going on, when does it then fall to the individual, or does it, to then sit with their leader and say, I'm feeling this way because I'm taking on more work and not getting the promotion or the extra pay, or because, listen, I don't know what it is, but I'm going home and I'm just not enjoying the things I used to. Does it ever fall on the person to really have that open conversation with their leader so then their leader knows what boundaries not to cross or knows something's going on?
As I was listening to you ask that question, Josh, two things popped in my mind. One, the absence of trust, that means there's no leadership. Like that doesn't exist because trust is the key component of that. What I was thinking was you got to go back to the knowing your people part. And then as far as you go, meaning the collective you, we can only control what we think, feel, say, and do. So, yes, it is on us to advocate for our own mental, physical, emotional, psychological, and energetic health. Nobody else is going to do that for you. I talk to friends of mine, and I don't know if this is a new thing or if it's always been there. And I'm going to make a broad strokes comment here. So, every doctor that's listening to this, it doesn't mean all of you, but doctors have this habit of not listening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially with historically underrepresented communities or even women. So
Right.
you have to be brave enough. And again, goes back to that self respect to go, yo, like I had a doctor, and I come from a medical family. My grandfather was a doctor, so I know good medicine. And I have great doctors, thank God. But I had a doctor during an intake where he stared at the clipboard the whole time. And it annoyed me so much that I was finally like, yo, I'm up here, not on that clipboard. Connect with me as your patient. So, yeah, I think all of these things, we need to be champions for ourselves. And by the way, if you can't do that for yourself, find somebody who can. At least you can go in together. My brother hurt his back, and these doctors were not listening to him. And I said, okay, I'm going to go in with you. And I was like, they're probably going to be scared. So just relax because, again, they were telling him one thing and he was in such a panic and in such pain. He was filtering it a different way. So I wanted to make sure that, first of all, somebody heard and saw him. And if the doctors were saying something that was not accurate or was not reflective of the messaging he was giving, that there was somebody to help correct it. But again, you're your own best advocate. You really are.
Because you're never going to have, like you said, that person that is going to advocate for you or always ask those questions. You're going to have the people who are so focused in their day to day, because everybody's got something going on today.
Yeah.
They're going to be so focused in their stuff that you may have it. If you have a leader that's got a high EQ muscle, they may notice something's up. They may ask those questions. But if not, I think you mentioned it earlier, the high performers a lot of times are the ones who end up in this situation, but they're also the ones that have such high standards and respect for themselves that they're not going to let themselves fail, which I
Right.
believe would then drive them deeper into burnout. But a clueless, I'd say maybe IQ heavy, EQ light leader won't notice that. They'll just notice that the output is still there, but they'll not notice that you're killing the person in the process.
I think you're spot on, Josh. Here's what I was thinking. If it makes you nervous or you've got to go to this very cerebral person, I work with a lot of PhDs and engineers, and I love those men and women because their brains are brilliant.
Yeah.
And when they get emotional intelligence, it's like you literally see their, not literally, but you see their skulls crack open and their minds blow.
Yeah.
But what I would say is try to talk to them in their language. If they're a data driven person, talk to them in data. And don't be afraid to write things down and bring them in with you because this is, for me, I'm an emotional being. Sometimes when I get emotional, it's like a tornado and I can't find my way. So having something there in my hand to go, all right, these are the points I need to hit and this is the way I need to say it. That's a great thing to do and there's nothing wrong with that. And then following up with an email, obviously, to, I hate the per our discussion, but
Yeah.
it's really one of those things. So now they're hearing it, but they're also processing it through their eyes, and you're hitting two adult learning formats, audio and visual, but there's also kinesthetic. If you can speak to them and how it feels and how you're experiencing it and creating that emotional connection, that might get your case further. And it might also create a connection with your leader that didn't exist before.
I think that's such a great example because especially people who are emotional beings and are more EQ than IQ, or maybe along the line there, they want the conversations to be natural. They want it to be, I'm not going to go formalize this conversation. I already feel bad enough. I'm not going to go write everything down. But your example speaks to me because I actually have a leader that is exactly how you described. They are very high IQ, no EQ.
Yeah.
And they're the type of person that if I want to have an EQ based conversation, I will email them ahead of time as pre-work, not just write everything down like you said. I'll write everything down and then I'll send it to them and say, these are the things I want to discuss. And that gives them time to internalize what I want to talk about and have that background. And that is the only way I have found that I'm able to have a productive, emotional based conversation with them. And if not, if I more so catch them off guard, even having everything written down and I sit in that conversation with them, I will get nothing out of it. It's honestly a wasted half hour, and then it's a reset the next time we meet.
I'll tell you, there was something that you said that stood out. EQ is not something you have, it's something you build. I believe everybody has it. It's just, in some people, it's a muscle that atrophied. I'll give you an example. I had a really close friend who came to me. She reported to the CFO of Comcast, and she said, Kelly, throughout my life, and she's probably in her early 40s, throughout my life, I've always gotten like A's, but with human interaction, I've gotten like needs improvement. So what should I do? And I was like, Caitlin, you rescue senior dogs. You have that energy there. All we need to do is turn it over here. I'm not saying humans are animals, be very clear about that. But if the energy and practice is present somewhere in your life, you just have to tune it in. So find that connection point. That goes back to knowing your people. And another client who married an older man with two daughters. The younger daughter and she got along great. The teenage daughter and she, not so much. And one of the things we were talking about was finding that connection point. And I said, what does she like to do? What's her hobby? And she said, Japanese anime. And I said, guess what your homework is?
Wow.
She said, I'm watching Japanese anime. And I said, yes, because you need a connection point. You need a common vocabulary. Now they do. And they sit down and they like dress up and watch. Now they've got this connection where there wasn't one present. So for your person, find out what they really like. And let's see
Right.
if we can leverage that connection and that energy and that example to what you're doing at P&G, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's a great way to manage that interaction because that's what we have done where I'd say to simplify it more than it needs to be. The initial interactions are generally more robotic. And once you start talking about things that they enjoy, they more light up and they turn into a real person. And it's like Pinocchio, turn into a real boy.
Yeah,
And once that happens, then you can start having those conversations. And that's why, at least when we talk too, you hit the nail on the head. I call it an EQ muscle because it is something that you build. It's something that if you don't build it, it can atrophy. And it's something that you can work towards and you can
yeah,
become an EQ bodybuilder or you can have a normal muscle or whatever it is that you want. But I think it's very important to have that. And that then leads to a lot of things that you've mentioned so far of knowing your people, having those relationships that then help this whole situation.
absolutely. And you have to understand you don't recover from burnout and go back to normal. Normal is what made you sick. You really evolve, which is talking about going from an atrophied EQ muscle to working it. And part of those components of evolving is you honor your energy not as optional, as sacred. Your energy is sacred. You recognize no as a leadership act, not a personal failure. And that's something I see a lot is I can't say no. Yes, you can. You're
Right.
choosing not to. You design a rhythm of ambition and regeneration. It's not achievement that is chained to depletion. That is not it. And then we bring in resilience, which everybody is talking about.
Yep.
Resilience isn't surviving more suffering. Resilience is refusing to suffer needlessly in the first place at all. That's what it is. I think everything you're saying is spot on.
I feel like the world has changed. And in the past, getting depleted, getting burnt out was a badge of honor. I worked all these hours, I did all this, just like everybody else before me. And we seem to lose sight of the fact that the people that come before us are supposed to be there to make the world better so we don't have to go through things that they did. But instead, the attitude's more of, I went through it, so why don't they? When I was in college, I went through a fraternity. And with fraternities, it's always about, hey, we're going to haze everybody and do this. But the fraternity I joined was very much the thought process of, the people who came before me hated the hazing process. And so they stopped it. And we never got hazed. And it was that thought process of, I didn't enjoy what I went through. And instead of trying to make the person now go through the same thing so they have that badge of honor, we're just going to make things better. And I don't think we have that thought process in the professional world as much because we just continually see the same things. We're not fixing things for the future.
Yeah, what your fraternity did is what my whole coaching practice is built on, and not the hazing part. Let me be clear about that. It's sharing the obstacles, the bruises, the scars, the things I've overcome to
Mhm.
share with my clients so they don't have to go through that. Now, I don't have a magic wand, so I can't prevent Josh from driving off a figurative cliff because there might be learning in that for you that you're not supposed to avoid.
Right.
But if I can say, this is what happened in this situation, this is how I dealt with it, whatever resonates with you, take it and make it your own. Whatever doesn't, just leave in the session. It's all about learning from each other. And I think you're exactly right. And I hate to say it, but it's more present with female leaders. Like,
Really?
I've seen a lot of bullying from the boomer and X generation, which I am part of the X generation or Gen X, whatever you want to call it, bullying millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just turn around and give a hand up instead of closing the door on people? That's really what true leadership is. And it's not a binary. It's not like Josh wins, Kelly loses. It's not a zero sum game. For me, if you're winning, that means there's more of a chance for Kelly to win.
If we can, let's go back to something else that you mentioned, really the overcoming burnout. I want to touch on this because I'm interested to hear your perspective on what that looks like. Because as you've been talking, I've thought of a couple different things. If you can save the person from burnout, obviously you want to figure out what you can do differently in the future and what the individual can do, whether it's saying no or their approach. But do they stay in the same place or do they go the ever popular now quiet quitting route? That was the first thing I thought of when you said, hey, they go quiet with the gray space. And are they the people who are just there going through the motions, but they're quiet quitting? They're not doing anything above that? Or do you really have to just clear the board and start over? And is that when you really see people legitimately quit? They're not just quiet quitting and staying where they are. They're saying, I need to hit a reset button. And the only way to do that is to leave my current situation, start fresh, and make sure I set these boundaries and everything in this new place that I go to.
So that seems like it's two-part question. Let
Yeah.
me go back and say, I think the first one was, can people heal from burnout? Let's address that. So, first of all, yes, people can heal from burnout, but it's not passive. You don't heal from burnout by taking a vacation. You resurrect yourself by designing a life that no longer demands your death. Because that's what it is. Burnout is that slow death that we were talking
Mhm.
about. If you can still feel anger, grief, and longing, you still have skin in the game. But if you've hit the gray place where hope doesn't even register anymore, it's not impossible to come back, Josh. It's just damn heroic. Really. Think of the gray place like, this is how I see it in my mind. I equated it to Pleasantville, but it's almost like quicksand where you're slogging through that thickness. It's like somebody smearing Vicks Vapor Rub on your, and I say that because Josh works for P&G, and of course Vicks Vapor Rub is one of your products. But that's a great way to explain it. It's like you're not seeing clearly, you're filtering through and trying to find the color again. But again, the gray place is where hope doesn't live. It can't live, they can't coexist. And then let me just clarify. I think the second question was, how can leaders be proactive about burnout?
It was less about how, I mean, I did have that as a question as well of how they can be proactive, but my thought process is more so for the individual who is experiencing burnout, understanding they do that first part and try to figure out if they can come back, if it's worth coming back. And then what do you see coming out of that? Do you see more of that staying in the gray place, quiet quitting type mentality? Or do a lot of people more so evaluate that situation and say, there really is no more coming back? And the only way I'm able to come back, because it's not a vacation, because it's not me taking 2 weeks off, I have to leave my current situation, hit that reset button, and then start somewhere fresh to really get myself back from the burnout cliff.
It's hard to say because it's case by case basis. I've got a client right now who is a high powered executive in a healthcare system. And she texted me yesterday, I'm having major anxiety. I feel like I have a panic attack. Everybody's escalating things because the previous leader the role she stepped into when that person was terminated, there was a lot of stuff, a lot of complaints that were not addressed. And I said, okay, go back to your breath, just ground yourself, get calm until, I call it creating micro pockets of relief where you can just take 30 seconds to reset yourself. It's if you're a runner and you stop at the tables to get your orange slices and your goo and your water, it's meant to keep you going until you
Right.
can get to the point where you can fully rest.
Mm.
Luckily, this person has a great, very self-aware, very IQ and EQ married beautifully. And I said, I'll jump on the phone with you. We didn't have a session scheduled. And she texted me back and she's like, I've talked to my boss. I'm good. I'm taking the rest of the day off. So with that, she's in a situation where burnout is like stalking her a little bit, but she was able to take it to her boss and say, I need some time. Okay. Then there are people like a client I had that it was an HR business partner in a very toxic environment. And in her words, we extracted her from that company. Those are her words.
Wow.
And then we had to heal her burnout. And then basically what we did was when we placed her and we were looking for a new place, we were looking for a cultural match because my belief is you hire for character, not for
Right.
skill and tactics you can teach. Now, let me make a statement. If you're a brain surgeon, you obviously need the tactics and the skill. But again, this was a cultural fit, and we looked for places that didn't prevent burnout by sharing more perks. You prevent burnout by refusing to exploit human beings in the first place. And in the hiring process, you can ask certain questions. Do you reward boundaries more than achievements? Do you honor the full humanity, not just high performance? Do you normalize recovery, not just endurance? And do you design cultures where dignity is the baseline, not the exception to the rule? If your employees have to earn rest, you're not leading them, you're draining them, period. Again, leadership is not extraction, leadership is all about regeneration. And you, as a leader, are a key component to that. That's your job.
With that, we are nearing the end. So, do you have anything that you'd like to share with the audience once more before we sign off?
Yeah, if you're brave enough to leave survival mode behind, you don't just prevent burnout, you architect a life and a legacy that's actually worth living. And don't be afraid to speak up. And also, don't be afraid to leave. Don't be afraid to leave. Business opportunities like buses, there's always another one around the corner. Thank you, Richard Branson, for that. I'm always big about crediting people for their work. That's all I would say. And then, as a shameless plug, the 28-day Burnout to Bliss toolkit and journal. I beta tested that with the military. And basically, it's a really cool sacred space for you. The reason why I did it in an actual book and not digitally was because I wanted people to step away from all the electronics and have a sacred space where they could color and they could have a prompt, whether it was go do a primal scream. And then at the bottom of the page, Josh, they can rate it. So at the end of the 28 days, you go back and see the ones that you rated highest that impacted you the most positively.
Right.
And you keep doing those. So they create the micro pockets of relief so you don't get to the point of no return.
That sounds awesome. I will definitely go check that out. And so, to the audience, also, please, Burnout to Bliss is one of the books, and then Meerbott's Fables the other. Please
Yeah.
check those out.
Yeah, and Meerbott's Fables is extremely close to my heart. Again, shameless plug. It's a really cool book, and there's a fable in there called Conchita the Cheetah. I did it because I like rhyming, and basically it was a burnt out cheetah that, if you know anything about cheetah, when they hunt, they sprint. They're the fastest animal on earth.
Hmm.
But when they're done hunting, they take a 30-minute break to catch their breath.
Oh, wow.
Conchita gets more loaded on her plate, doing more with less. She has to hunt for two prides instead of one. And she starts taking that 30-minute break to rest and catch her breath. Her spots start falling off her coat. And I'll let you, if you want, go on my website, it's there. But it's really cool. You read the fable, they're very short. There's a moral, there's three questions at the end, and then there's a coloring page for you to take a quiet moment to really meditate on the awarenesses that have come up for you in the fable. But yeah, Conchita the Cheetah is one of my favorites.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to go check that out. I encourage everybody to go check that out too. So Kelly Meerbott, I will put all of her links in the description area here. So link to her website. We'll put the books there as well so everybody can go back and reference those and hopefully go check those out. But seriously, want to say thank you for everything that you've shared with us here today. If anybody has any questions for Kelly, like I said, I'll have all of her information there. You can email me at leadinquarters@gmail.com with any questions. I can pass that on to Kelly as well. And then please check out our other podcast, the audio podcast at Leadership in Quarters on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, everywhere else. And then our YouTube podcast here, Lead in Quarters on YouTube. But Kelly, seriously, thank you for everything. Everybody, please check her out. I will say, out of all the guests that I've had so far, it's been the most difficult to decide on a topic to talk to you about because all the topics that I saw that you enjoy talking about and you have the expertise in are things that are near and dear to my heart. And honestly, between bias and unconscious bias and burnout, those were both two very big deals to me and big interest areas. So please, people, if you have any questions or any interest, please reach out to myself or Kelly and we can get everybody connected. But your expertise in the area is very well appreciated.
Oh, Josh, I appreciate you. I'm simply reflecting back and playing with you, which is really fun to do. And I wouldn't be opposed to coming back and talking about unconscious bias. But this is a great space that you've curated, and I'm honored that you allowed me to share it with you for a moment in time.
Perfect. I appreciate it. We'll definitely have to stay in touch and see if we can get you back for the unconscious bias topic. But thank you again, seriously, Kelly, and I appreciate it.
My pleasure.